Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, a special conversation with Julie Raskin. My name is Aria Cochran, and I am the Director of Communications here at Waterfront Alliance. Today's conversation is going to be about the future of our waterfronts and the people, partnerships, and ideas shaping what comes next. As a region defined by water, the choices we make now will influence access, resilience, and opportunities for years to come. And we are so excited to dig into that conversation today with our new president and CEO, Julie Raskin. The conversation will be guided by our moderator, Matthew Washington, who is vice president and chief of staff at Phipps House, as well as a Waterfront Alliance board member. Before we get started, I just want to note a couple of housekeeping items. First, there is a Q&A box available in the Zoom webinar. However, we have pre-selected questions for today from those submitted when you all registered. Thank you so much for everybody who submitted a question. There were so many that we had to go through and try and decide which ones to answer, but I think we got most of them covered. If we don't have time for a question that you were really dying to ask, please feel free to reach out to Waterfront Alliance and set up time for a one-on-one conversation. Second item is we will have several polls running throughout the webinar today to help you stay engaged and get an understanding of who's in our audience and what your priorities are. So please feel free to answer those polls as they come up. And we hope you enjoy the webinar. Thanks again for joining us, and I will now turn it over to Matthew to kick us off.
Thanks so much, Aria. And as you all can see, the first poll that we call the icebreaker poll is starting. We just want to get you into the muscle memory of seeing how it pops up. So please feel free to answer, and we'll get back to that. But I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to have this conversation with Julie. Again, as Aria said, my name is Matthew Washington. I have the distinct pleasure of being on the board of directors of Waterfront Alliance. And I did want to just bring greetings on behalf of Kathy Robb, our board chair, who's on the webinar today. I know that we have Diane Dillon Ridgely on the board, who's also on the webinar, and others as well. So we're thrilled to have you all with us today. Excited to be a part of this conversation with our new president and CEO, Julie. So have fun, have a good time. And Aria, thank you so much for all that you've done. You've done a great job at consolidating many of your questions. So I think we'll hit everyone's main interests. So stay tuned, and we're just going to have a good time today. So we want to get started. Julie Raskin, you're the new president and CEO of Waterfront Alliance, and the whole world wants to know who is Julie. So tell us about yourself, Julie. We want to know who you are
Sure.
and what's going on.
Matthew, I have to say the last time I was on a webinar with Matthew, he was interviewing me for this job. So having a little flashbacks of wondering if I got the job, but it's nice to be on the other side of things. Matthew's an excellent interviewer. I guess sort of before I dive into what's going on at the Waterfront Alliance, some context about me. I have a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old and a very old rescue beagle named Willa. So I'm basically working all the time, and when I'm not working, I'm cleaning up poop or feeding one of my dependents. So I think it's a really good thing that I love my job. This has been fantastic. And I really came to the Waterfront Alliance because I care deeply about this city and this region. You know, I spent most of my career working for New York City. Obviously, I'm raising my family here, and I know, and you all know because you're here, that this region literally sinks or swims or, survives or thrives based on what we do with our waterfronts. I'm sure a lot of you saw the spread in last Sunday's New York Times. It was kind of one of the segments of the story about New York's next superstorm, but I thought the opening line of that article really crystallized how important our work is. And it said, it says, the largest city in the country, us, is mostly a cluster of islands. Its inlets and rivers rise and fall with the tides. So what we do here is so critical, but I especially love how the Waterfront Alliance does its work. And it's really through this cross-sector collaboration and community building. And that's very much my ethos. That's my background. I've worked in nonprofit, government, and corporate. Really believe in the power of bringing all those sectors together. So, I've admired this organization a long time, but I could not be more thrilled to be leading it right now. I think the challenges are very urgent, but there's also so much opportunity. So, Matthew, did I get the job?
Julie, you're knocking it out the park. So batting 1,000. So keep up the good work. And as you all can see, the first poll popped up. So please feel free to answer that as we continue on this with this conversation. So Julie, thanks for sharing a little bit about yourself. There's some more fun things that we may hear about you as we continue to join in this process and learn about you. But Julie, you're now the president and CEO of Waterfront Alliance. What's your vision for the next 5 years, and where do you see the organization having the greatest impact across the region?
That's a great question. Before I jump in, I do want to caveat, I think I'm about 50 days in the job, so I do have thoughts and I have ideas. But I do want to take this, what I think of as sort of an initial honeymoon period, and I want to listen and learn. I think you're all here, you've been involved with the organization in some way, shape, or form for months or years. So I do want to hear from you. I know this is not the right forum for that, but this is an opening and I want to hear your reaction to what I have to say today. So please follow up. You can send an email, we can find some time for coffee. But I'm enjoying this opportunity to kind of go on a listening tour as well. But what I'm thinking about for the next few years when I think about the Waterfront Alliance and my leadership is a few things. First is this moment in time. Second is kind of who I am as a leader and the strengths that I bring. And then third is the Waterfront Alliance and how can this organization make the most impact. So I'll sort of take you through those. I like things in threes, as you'll see. So this moment, I think we can all agree that climate change is accelerating, or I hope we all agree that that's a problem. There are new administrations in both New York City and New Jersey. And in New York City, we know that the city just voted for affordability and equity. So I think this moment calls for a truly collaborative approach to building waterfronts that work for our future, and that with equity at the center. So to me, I think this means three things. Again, three. We need waterfronts that work for our people, especially communities with the least access and the greatest exposure to risk. We need waterfronts that work for our economy. So that means supporting maritime economy, waterborne transportation, clean energy, good jobs. And we need waterfronts that work for our climate. So we need to strengthen resilience and long-term stewardship. But I think what's equally important is sort of how we get there. And I think that's where my leadership and kind of the unique qualities of Waterfront Alliance come into play. So again, I think there's a three-pronged approach here. Number one is really centering waterfronts in public decision making. So there's been a lot of discussion about this. Some of you probably in the audience have placed op-eds about this maybe. But I think a lot of folks feel that there needs to be, more focus and a more centralized oversight and expertise around waterfronts at the highest levels of government and coordination across the region. So in New York City, for example, I think this means linking waterfronts to some of the new mayor's priorities. When Mayor Mamdani talks about fast and free buses, I don't see how that can happen without moving freight off the roads through blue highways or expanding ferry access to transit deserts. When we talk about affordability, I think that depends on a maritime sector that works and offshore wind that lowers energy costs. Many more examples, but just as an idea. Prong two, I think, is really activating communities to have real power in shaping their shorelines. So some ways we are doing this are expanding the reach of our Estuary Explorers public school program, introducing wedge training and maybe maritime training too to community boards, tenant leaders, grassroots organizations, and everyday New Yorkers. And then also accelerating community-led waterfront planning for public access. That's how we got our start as an organization, and that's still a priority. But I think now we really need to focus on those neighborhoods that have been underserved historically. So some examples include the South Bronx. We're doing a really great project on Staten Island's North Shore. And then that access, really activating that with things like swim safety education and actual opportunities to bring New Yorkers to get their feet wet with events like our City of Water Day or I don't want to steal David's lead, but bringing back the cardboard kayak contest, things like that, where we can actually get people into the water. And lastly, the third prong is really our secret sauce, right? And that's the convening. So it's convening public, private, and civic leaders to actually implement these solutions together. So what I'm excited about this year is more action-oriented convening. So, we have some tweaks that we're making to our annual conference, and then also to looking to host targeted convenings throughout the year on really specific topics that need more attention, like blue highways, like waterfront permitting, like housing. And then lastly, what I love that we're doing is actually demonstrating what collaborative planning looks like through site-specific projects like Flushing Meadows, Corona Park, and Coney Island Creek. So I think if we do all those three things well, we do build a New York, New Jersey harbor where waterfronts truly work. They work for people, they work for the economy, and they work for the climate.
Well, Julie, you've had a busy first 50 days. So what are you going to do with your first 100? Really wonderful. And as you all heard from Julie, you may need to get yourselves ready for some cardboard kayaks. Exciting. But just really, and continuing along, Julie, you mentioned the pieces that the Daily News covered on climate. So I want to talk a little bit about climate with you right now and get some insight. Climate risk is accelerating,
Yeah.
faster than policy and infrastructure. How is Waterfront Alliance prioritizing resilience across different communities from frontline neighborhoods to industrial and working waterfronts?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I think what we're seeing is that the risks are not evenly distributed, and that communities that have historically, like I said, had least access to the waterfront or have been underserved are often facing the greatest environmental risks. So I think the approach that Waterfront Alliance takes is really strong, and that's starting by asking who is most exposed, who has been left out of past decision making, and where can action now make the greatest difference. So our role is really to ensure that resilience planning or climate adaptation is not something that is done to communities, whether those communities are residential or commercial, but something built with them and implemented at the scale and speed this moment demands. So I think I mentioned again the Flushing Meadows Corona Park Resilience Study or a project we're just kicking off in Coney Island. Those are real live examples where we're working with community to kind of envision and then bring to life what change could actually be made on the ground to make those sites more resilient. I think another example is our climate informed communities work, where it's a very grassroots program. We're really getting into neighborhoods and helping kind of grassroots organizers and civic leaders address a full range of climate impacts. Some of that is flooding, some of that is excessive heat. But at the same time, I think resilience, we don't always think about protecting commerce and working waterfronts. We think about kind of the residential communities. But what really kind of brought into focus the importance of this actually in one of my final interviews, where I was meeting with Matthew and several of the other board members. Mike Stamatis, who's on our board and is also the CEO of Red Hook Terminals, told me a story about Hurricane Sandy when he was trying to save his facility and was, eventually trapped on his roof, nearly drowning and had to be rescued. So I think that really brought into focus for me kind of the work that needs to be done across sectors to save our waterfronts.
Thank you for your insights, Julie, and what a powerful story that you just shared, and the importance of these. As you all can see, the second poll is going up. So, David, thanks for getting us up there. Excited that you all are excited about the work that Waterfront Alliance is doing in the first poll. You all said many of you said all of these things are important, so we're excited for that work. You talked about Red Hook Terminal a little bit, and let's discuss the working waterfront some. The working waterfront is essential to New York and New Jersey's economy, but there's a lot happening. How do we balance all of these things, Julie?
Yeah.
There's resilience, public access, growth of the green economy, offshore wind.
Yeah.
How do we bring it all together?
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, the working waterfront is essential to the New York, New Jersey economy. It supports jobs, freight movement. It's how we get a lot of our goods, energy when offshore wind can prevail. And really is underpinning many of the industries that our region depends on every day. So our goal is really not to choose between resilience or public access or economic activity, but to design waterfronts that can do all three, but in a way that reflects how the city and the region actually function. And I think we have that unique vantage point of sort of the bird's eye view where, we can look across the entire harbor and say, like, it may make more sense for this pier to be industrial or for commercial use. Whereas this pier over here, like you can't really get a boat over there, but there's a great street end where we could get people could actually walk into the water if we made it a little bit more safe. We're really doing all three. We're a very much yes and organization, and that's I think what I love about Waterfront Alliance. I think what you'll see soon, we are going to publish our 2026 policy platform. And one of the things we're calling for, which as I mentioned, many others in the community are, is stronger coordination and oversight of waterfront and maritime issues so that, these concerns or these kind of different roles that the waterfront needs to play aren't being decided on in silos, that we're also, our government reflects that view that can look across the harbor and kind of think strategically about how all these needs can be met. Yeah, we need all. So yes, and
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And, keep checking the chat. You'll see some good information, some useful links that Aria is putting in there. Thank you for doing that, Aria. Julie, as we talk about, sort of the complexity and how do we balance, all of these components of the waterfront, you know, a lot of it comes to coordination. And so
yeah,
from your perspective, how can Waterfront Alliance sort of be that vehicle to strengthen regional coordination, between New York, New Jersey, between Brooklyn and Queens and Manhattan
yeah.
and all of the different elements, that are a challenge across our shared waterfront and climate challenges?
Yeah, great question. Uh, my orientation, as I mentioned, is pretty New York City heavy. So that said, I think half our board lives in New Jersey, including Matthew. And one of our most critical staff members, Cynthia, who literally keeps us afloat on the operations side. So I promise leadership and staff will not let me forget about New Jersey. But in all seriousness, we are a regional organization because the harbor is a shared system, like you said, and we need to think about it holistically. So I think this is one of the places where we really can have the greatest impact because there aren't other organizations that are looking at it the same way we are. I think one way we do that is by convening. So our upcoming waterfront conference, which is May 19th, save the date, is designed to be a truly regional forum. And I think that's pretty special. But in addition to that, our programming reflects a really strong cross harbor presence. So we have partnerships across education. Um, just as I mentioned, offshore wind in New York City, we're involved in several New Jersey-based offshore wind coalitions. And I'm very excited. We have a meeting actually with the new governor there to advise on the energy transition. So um, I think there's a lot of learnings that can come from what's going on the New York City side of the harbor, and maybe can help New Jersey be successful on that front as well. Our City of Water Day is one of our flagship events. I think it was one of the original programs of the Waterfront Alliance, and it just has grown and grown. It used to be, my understanding is it used to be a centralized event at the seaport and then at Governor's Island. And I think the entire staff quit one year because it was just such an undertaking to produce this enormous event. And so I think it worked to our advantage, though, that what we ended up doing is partnering with HEP to make this really a regional program and to really sort of lift up and catalyze and shine light on different community-based organizations that have water experiences across the harbor. So the event now is 70 plus little events all happening on the same day, but they're happening all over the harbor. And those are opportunities to really actually get into the water. And it's very well coordinated across the region. I think another example, I think many of you were at our Heroes of the Harbor gala. I was there, although I don't remember it because I was newly postpartum and was in somewhat of a daze. But what I do remember is that we gave a really powerful award to the New Jersey DEP Meadowlands and Hudson River Rebuild by Design projects. Really incredible transformative projects. And I think that's another great example of sort of how we work across the region. So yeah, I think our role is to be this trusted, neutral convener, really helping New York and New Jersey move faster together and be more effective than either one could alone.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that, Julie. And Julie, you told us that you're New York City. You're from New York City. You don't know New Jersey as well, but in 50 days, getting a meeting with the new governor is pretty impressive. I'm a Jersey resident, and I can't get a meeting with the new governor. So you're doing something right, and we're excited about that. I want to talk a little bit about one of our programs, one of our popular programs, Julie, Wedge. How does Waterfront Alliance ensure that projects, especially wedge certified ones, continue to deliver real ecological, social, and community value over the life of those projects? And so, would love to hear your insight into that.
Yeah. So for anyone not familiar with WEDGE, it is the Waterfront Edge Design Guidelines. Acronym is WEDGE. It's one of our flagship programs, and what it is essentially a clear, credible standard for what good waterfront development looks like. Its kind of three pillars are resilience, ecology, and access. So one of the things that WEDGE does is certify developments, new projects or existing projects. And I think that's a really great starting point and essential and is continuing to grow. We're getting, increasing requests for projects to be wedge certified across the nation, which is very encouraging. But what I think is really amazing is what wedge guidelines are now actually getting codified into various city codes and RFPs. And that's where I see that lasting impact happening. So just a few examples I learned about just last week. The city of New Rochelle has zoning code that requires wedge for waterfront multifamily residential sites. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey includes wedge in its sustainable infrastructure guidelines. And then in Miami, which is, the only other city similarly situated in water that to us, there are multiple city ordinances that offer density bonuses for using wedge. So you get more. You can do more if you leverage the wedge certification. And what's really neat there too is that surrounding Miami, there's a lot of smaller municipalities, and they're essentially copying that code. So it's spreading. But I think beyond that sort of government and governance, accountability also means building capacity beyond government. What's really cool is last year we surpassed 1,300 wedge associates. So those are the professionals, whether they're landscape architects, engineers, academics that are certified in wedge development. And they are spread across 34 cities. So this is not just New York City anymore. It's not just Miami. It's across the country. It's in the Midwest, Colorado. So now we have this growing constituency of professionals and community leaders who share this common framework and expectations for waterfront projects. So it's like a language that we can all get on the same page about. Something that I want to do, and I think sort of bringing wedge back to one of its original purposes was to be a tool for neighborhoods and community members to become more informed about waterfront development. So something we're working on this year is building out a wedge community toolkit, and I think looking at ways to apply that as well through training opportunities. But the goal here really is that when residents understand the nuances of waterfront planning, which I don't think most people in New York City do, they are more empowered and they're equipped to ask better questions and they can hold decision makers accountable and they can, if say EDC or a developer is presenting at a community board meeting, they can really ask the right questions and sort of know what to look for. So I think Wedge is a really incredible tool and it can be applied in all of these different ways. And when it works the way that it's meant to, it does create this shared language, like I said, and it really ensures that investments we make in our waterfront and development we make in our waterfront delivers real value. So long after the certification and after the ribbon cutting is over, that we have development that actually works, like I said, for our people, for our climate, and for our economy.
That's that's great. And Julie, the Wedge Community Toolkit sounds amazing. I mean, do you see, children using the toolkit and learning how to, draw their waterfront? What could that look like, that community toolkit?
Yeah, I think it can take a lot of different forms. Something, and I'd like to talk about children because I think there's a different approach there. But something that I did at the Sanitation Foundation, I think one of the favorite programs that I launched, that was my previous role, was helping to found and grow a nonprofit to support the sanitation department. And one of the programs we launched pretty early on was the Trash Academy. So I'm seeing something like that, which is, I heard yesterday they now have 1,500 applicants, just regular New Yorkers that want to learn about trash. But I think there's the same interest in our waterfronts and in the same ways that every New Yorker interacts with their trash every day. Everybody that lives in this region interacts in some way, shape, or form with their waterfront, whether it's immediate or kind of secondary. So I think there's, again, information. I'm new here. I want to hear from folks on what this could look like, but sort of the people's wedge or I think this could also work for the maritime sector as well. I think there's so few people that understand how the working waterfront works. And it's super interesting. There's a lot of history there, but there's also a lot of kind of contemporary applications. So let me get back to you on that. But this is one where I'd love folks' ideas because I hear the need for this a lot, and I think we're the right people to do this, and I want to think about what shape it could take.
That sounds wonderful. And look, education is important. I'm very proud to say that my niece just started going to school at SUNY Maritime.
No
So
way.
she's she just started last week, and I think she'll, be a mariner and travel the world on a
My
working
God.
ship. So I'm very proud of her and very excited. And as we think about education and stewardship, these are real long-term resilience strategies. And how is Waterfront Alliance engaging educators, students, and creating informal learning opportunities to build the next generation of waterfront leaders?
Yeah. I think this was actually my mom's question from the pre-submitted Zoom question. So thank you, Cynthia Raskin. But I feel very passionately about education, and I think we have some incredible programs here at the Waterfront Alliance that we could and need to and will grow with some more philanthropic support. But I think if we really do call ourselves a city of water, what was striking to me is what I learned in one of my first weeks here is that when we go into public schools and we do our Estuary Explorers program, we're often going to schools that are in walking distance of the waterfront. And I think about half on average of the students have never spent time at the waterfront or understand that they can go to that waterfront, that there's a way to access it, and don't have any strong feeling or understanding of how it functions within their communities. So that was really that disconnect is why we developed the Estuary Explorers program. And that is a program in which we have educators going into New York City public schools. And it's a 5-part series. There's classroom work, but then it culminates in an actual trip to the water. Where students literally get their feet wet, or I was told maybe not their feet, but at least their hands, maybe depending on the season, So it's learning that's grounded in real places that are, places that are kind of true and relevant to each of those students. But we engage learners at multiple stages, and I think that's important to have that sort of like wraparound and holistic view of education. So we work with educators themselves. We have teacher trainings. We have one coming up in March, and we offer CTLE credits for this, so continuing education credits. And we equip educators with tools and curriculum and really the confidence to bring waterfront literacy to their classrooms because many of them are not familiar or not trained in that themselves. Youth leadership is another focus for us. So we have had this incredible program called the Waterfront Scholars for college students. And we bring college students to our waterfront conference, and there's kind of a whole separate program that helps them make the most out of that conference with some kind of workforce development and tips and tricks for networking. They make a presentation, but brand new this year, we also now are launching a youth ambassadors program for high school students. So we're inviting them to the conference as well. And we're working with an industry commission as well to connect high schoolers with actual maritime jobs. So, we have had a longstanding partnership with the harbor school. That's kind of the high school version, maybe, of SUNY Maritime. But there's a lot more we can do there. I am furiously working on grant applications to expand those programs. So I welcome any leads there. And then another way we do this, I think that's also maybe kind of less traditional education is through our climate informed communities work. And that's where we're really going into neighborhoods. Our staff is in the field, kind of working with individuals and civic leaders on kind of a whole suite of climate risks that are relevant. It's really not a one size all fits solution, but really kind of what's relevant to that specific neighborhood and providing the right resources, connecting them with relevant to the agencies or other CBOs that can help combat some of those climate risks. So I think altogether we're looking at this pipeline really. We want, students to educators to community leaders so that the next generation of waterfront leaders is informed and empowered and ready to kind of take the reins and steward the harbor for the long term.
That's awesome. Thank you. And, Julie, as you talk about the Waterfront Scholars Program, I remember at last year's conference, a young woman who's studying for her Master's in Public Administration, Ariba Hashmi, was there and excited about the conference. There was a little scavenger hunt game, and we were competing, Ariba and I, and she wiped the floor with me. She beat me and she won it out, but it's an amazing program and connects young people in a powerful way. And as you talk about education, just thought it made sense to share a personal story. Growing up in Spanish Harlem myself in New York City, I was very close to the East River, but never got to the river, never spent
Mm.
time with the water. And it wasn't until the fourth grade I got on this great boat that many of our attendees have heard of called Clearwater, and they pulled up a trap and got some animals from the water, and I saw a seahorse in there. And I thought
Oh.
this was some mystical, magical creature, but I found out that it was in my backyard, and I've been fascinated ever since. The other thing that I learned in that moment was uh, Disney did not give me a perfect, accurate representation of a flounder because from The Little Mermaid, I thought a flounder was a pudgy yellow and blue fish. But when I saw one from our waterways, I learned that a flounder is actually a flat fish with eyes on the same side of its head and
Oh
it's
my God.
brown. So uh, Disney will they'll figure it out. They'll work it out. But it was a
Oh
wonderful
no.
experience and it changed my life. So as you all can see, the next poll has popped up. So I appreciate all the activity and your participation in the poll. Julie, you've talked about a lot of different things, many that are happening, but as we know, the work never happens alone.
Yeah.
How can members, community organizations, private sector partners, and others play a more active role in shaping policy and stewardship of our amazing waterfront?
Yeah, I think you're right, Matthew. So, what I love about Waterfront Alliance is we literally do nothing alone. Um, this is why I think I have only up to 15 minutes of unscheduled time per day. We are constantly working and meeting with partners. Um, we exist to bring sectors together. That's at the heart of what we do. So in our work, there is literally a role for everyone. I will list some roles, but if you don't feel represented here, I promise there is a role for you. We have a corporate council that brings together the business community, and it's a chance for kind of businesses that are located here or doing a lot of work here and care about the city to both connect with each other, but also we often bring in local leaders, elected officials, members of the government to either present or to engage in conversation. So it's really a way for the business community to kind of understand the needs of the region or sort of connect the dots on how their work can be most impactful. We also have things like our Rise to Resilience Coalition. So that's over 100 partners across New York and New Jersey. That's everything from kind of nonprofits like We Act for Environmental Justice and New York Jersey Future, Regional Plan Association, but also, large engineering firms and business that all are coming together to advance really urgent climate resilience policy. So that's a very policy-oriented group, but we recognize that we were going to be more effective together than alone. And so, that's become a very powerful coalition. Um, we're including some links on how you can join it. And then I will keep coming back to this, our waterfront conference, because it really embodies so much of what we do. It is coming up May 19th, and that is a space where all of these constituencies can come together. It's the students, it's the corporate sector, it's engineers, designers, concerned citizens, and grapple with the toughest issues facing our waterfront and our region today. I know it's a packed house. We're often kind of busting at the seams there, so looking to try to figure out how we can bring more people into that conference. But something that we're certainly talking about doing this year is how to extend beyond that conference. So when the conference ends, the conversation doesn't end. And so one of the things we're looking at are sort of more targeted follow-up discussions. Again, probably focus on specific issues. A good example is blue highways. I think it's something people are really excited about. There's a lot of kind of work being done on it, but I think a strong feeling that it needs to move faster, and we sort of need to bring decision makers to the table that may be coming from different sectors, and that we're a great group to do that. Another example is beneficial reuse. There's a lot of challenges there, but a lot of opportunity. So kind of maybe not everybody at the conference wants to talk about that, but there's a targeted group and we can get a little bit deeper after the conference. Permitting is a very hot topic as well, maybe not for everybody again, but targeted. But yeah, I wouldn't be a good CEO if I didn't also mention the philanthropic support that we need to make this happen. So, there really is a role for members of our community, like everyone on this webinar, everyone who participates in our work, to pitch in some way. That makes a big difference. And, our programming and our advocacy work is extremely collaborative. So is our fundraising, and that ensures that our work can happen. So there is space and a need, like I said, for literally everybody at this table. We are facing some of the most important issues of our time, and we need everybody's brain on this. That's how we're going to solve this.
That's right. That's excellent. And Julie, you talk about decision makers. You're meeting with the governor of New Jersey. We have a new mayor. We have here in New York City many new members of the city council. Government agencies. You brought up permitting. There are a lot of partners, in government who you'll be working with, who we are working with Waterfront Alliance, and how do you see, the opportunities that exist
Mhm.
with so many new things happening for Waterfront Alliance
Yeah.
to dive in?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's such a ripe moment. There has not been, as we pointed out, Matthew and our joint op-ed last weekend, There wasn't much talk, for example, in the New York City mayoral in the election cycle from Mayor Mamdani about waterfront plans and resilience. So we're encouraged. The mayor appointed Louise Young to be chief climate officer. Louise was recognized by the Waterfront Alliance in 2020 as a resilience champion. We have a whole WaterWire article on her, so please go check that out, and maybe folks can link to it here. So we know it's being taken seriously, but I think, like I said, it's really linking waterfronts back to all of those other priorities. And like I said, the reason I came here is because, truly I'm a cities person and I'm thinking about uh, all of these municipal functions and they all intersect with the waterfront. That's what it all comes back to in this region. So I think just really making that connection crystal clear is step one. Step two is actually getting out in the field and having the meetings with all these folks. I have a full calendar, fortunately, of meetings with many of the council members and kind of new leadership in the city government. We mentioned in New Jersey at the state level. So really getting our policies and agenda out there. The team published right before I joined some priorities for the mayor's first 100 days. But as I mentioned, we are also working on a larger overall 2026 policy platform for the Waterfront Alliance. Matthew's been helping, our board is helping. We're almost ready to publish that, and that has policies that are across city and both states that we think are really critical to advance to really create the waterfronts of the future that we need. So I think, like I said, this happens at every level. It needs to happen by centering waterfronts in the highest levels of government, sort of like, hello, if you don't already realize it, waterfronts are essential to getting every municipal goal accomplished. So pay attention and here's how you can do it. And then, like I said, number two, really activating communities, activating residents, neighborhood associations to have a seat at the table, and then being that table that brings everybody together to actually move initiatives forward and kind of force the decision making and demonstrate, like through some of our design work, what collaborative planning can really look like.
That's excellent. Thank you. And Julie, you brought up wedge again, waterfront edge design guidelines, and you'd mentioned earlier that we have 1,300 wedge
Mhm.
associates. Really phenomenal. One question that, has come up is, how do we get more to buy into Wedge? How do
Mhm.
we think about Wedge, not just as an individual certification, but can we think about Wedge as a part of, rezoning entire areas? And what do you think the prospect or the push for Waterfront Alliance could be in that regard?
Yeah, I think I touched on it briefly, the way that we're codifying wedge in zoning code, really. And it's being included in RFPs. And I mentioned just a few cities, but there's many more that we're seeing wedge popping up in guidelines. So I think it's becoming, more of a common framework, and it really is a national and actually now internationally recognized program, thanks to one of our board members, Eugene Montoya. So it sets the example, and I think there are ways. Something that I wouldn't have expected is that we're doing wedge projects in the Mississippi River Basin, and that's thanks to a grant from the Walton Family Foundation. So that's something kind of new and unexpected for us. We're used to thinking about coasts, right? But there is water everywhere. And I'm from Chicago. One of the things that drew me to this job is that I grew up in a city where the water and the lakefront was fully accessible. And that was partly because the city burned down and they rebuilt it in such a way, intentionally making the waterfront accessible. But all that to say that wedge applies, to rivers, to lakes, to creeks, and so we are seeing growth in parts of the country that we just wouldn't have expected. It's why I think on my first week here, Joseph, who leads the wedge program, was flying to Iowa, and I'm like, Iowa, that's a surprising place for a Waterfront Alliance staff member to be going, but. it's really taking off. And I think, we built something that's useful, it's accessible. There's a lot of energy around, and it gets people on the same page so that we do have this common language. And it's evolving. I think we're on maybe 3.0 or 4.0 version of it. So it's a living document. It's not something that's going to be set in stone, but it's going to adapt as the climate changes, as the needs change, as we see more applications of it.
That's excellent. I am, we've had a lot of great questions. I do want to get back to permitting because you mentioned
No,
permitting,
no, no,
yeah,
no.
which is a funny one, but interesting. How important is permitting when it comes to waterfront and, some of the work that we do, and how can Waterfront Alliance play a role in helping communities understand permitting clearly and how to access it because it's a very complex issue.
Yeah, I specifically asked not to have a question on permitting, but maybe that didn't get to you, Matthew. No, that's fine. It's one of the least interesting things to talk about, but maybe one of the most important. So, um, look, I think that what I'm talking about when we talk about having these more targeted convenings, but also when we talk about equipping community board members and tenant leaders with this information, things, land use decisions in New York City, at least, go through a very long and involved public process often. So if you don't have members of the public that are informed or feel confident to ask questions about permitting or think more creatively about permitting or how permitting can change to adapt to the needs or opportunities like beneficial reuse, it's always easier to stay with the status quo, and inertia is strong. So I think we need to kind of attack it from all sides. So, there's certainly a policy angle, but there's also a grassroots angle, and a convening angle. So I'll go back to my kind of three strategies here. Government and policy, community, and then bringing folks together to actually move the needle.
That's awesome. One of the things that we have been fortunate to have, waterfront access and then in-water access, in-water programs. We talked about some uh, cardboard kayaks. Julie, are you a kayaker, a rower, a swimmer? How do you like to engage in the water?
I did grow up kayaking in Lake Michigan. My dad was really into kayaking for a while. And then in the winter, he would go to one of those like indoor fake kayak pools that, has fake waves and all of that. And yeah, I was really surprised when I moved to New York and there was no way to get to the water. I came here for college. I was at Columbia on the Upper West Side, right by the river. And I think my only experience getting close to the water was I had some really smart but not smart friends that I think after finishing their final exams got a inflatable raft from Target and launched themselves into the Hudson River and then had to be rescued by the Coast Guard, because that's not a smart thing to do. So, I think there's a craving for more opportunity. I've had the privilege of going kayaking through some of the kind of community boat launches, both in Washington Heights and one of my first experiences when I graduated from Columbia and got kicked out of my dorm and moved to Brooklyn. I lived in the Gowanus area, and I think my first week living there, I went on a canoe with the Gowanus dredgers, and that was 2008, so things were not as clean as they are now. But I read that soon we will be swimming in the Gowanus Canal, so I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, water is essential and it's calming and it's good for the soul. It's good for health, and besides all of the economic and kind of logistical reasons that we talked about, bringing people to the water, I think, will just benefit the entire city. So I'm really excited about our public access work. And then about the swim safety education. I know, when I worked at the Parks Department, I think one of the challenges that Parks has been facing for years is not having enough lifeguards. And that comes from not really having a pipeline. And I think that's really starting to change. I know last year they were able to increase the salary, and I think they cut down on the some of the requirements for the test, but that starts with building the pipeline. So the same way that we're bringing New York City public school students to the water through estuary explorers, I think there's similar work to be done there. We're working with the Swim Safety Coalition that just actually was successful in having a local law passed that's requiring water safety education information to be distributed to all second grade students in New York City public schools. So, I think we're really kind of inching our way there, but need to move a lot faster if we want the next generation of New Yorkers to be, safe and smart and confident and excited about embracing our city of water.
That's awesome. And speaking of City of Water, it's another plug for City of Water Day. And don't forget to check out our website, everyone, to get all the latest information and find out what's happening. And also, Julie, thanks for fielding that question about permitting. But I do want to let everyone know May 19th is our conference, and we will
Yes.
have a permitting symposium. So for everyone who is excited about permitting can join that symposium. It'll be really wonderful and greatly appreciated. Julie, as you talk about, safety and even lifeguards and swim safety, such an important issue. And, unfortunately, too many, particularly in low-income communities, are not taught how to swim. And so we're so glad that Waterfront Alliance is paying attention and ringing the bell about this issue and making sure that in-water safety is prioritized. So we greatly appreciate that. I did have one very important question from a really wonderful person who wanted to know what your favorite ice cream is, Julie.
Uh, that was a real question, right?
That was a real question. Yeah.
Um, I think a weird thing about me is I don't love ice cream, but I love frozen yogurt. And the more this is like against all of everything else about me as a person, but like when it comes to frozen yogurt, the more artificial, the better. So I think it's because there was a Tasty Delight in the like dining hall at Columbia that I got sort of hooked on that. So I'm a frozen yogurt fiend. There's only two Tasty Delights left in New York City. For those of you that were here in sort of the aughts and the Sex and the City years, they were like Starbucks. They were on every block, and now there's one in the 30s and one in the 70s in Manhattan. So I go far out of my way to find Tasty Delight. But yeah, I think they're going to be gone soon, so I may need to move on to actual ice cream.
Well, we welcome you with open arms. Uh, so, Julie, thanks for answering some questions. I do want to welcome Arya back, who wants to give us some updates and reminders about some upcoming uh, activities with Waterfront Alliance. And Julie, we're excited about your leadership. We're excited about how you lead this organization, this coalition, and drive things that are important to those of us in the region and really across the country as we think about Wedge and its impact and uh, doing incredible work to bring people to their waterfronts, to remind those of us who live in big cities that water is important and it's worth fighting for, it's worth protecting. So thank you for your leadership. I'm excited to join you on this journey. And Arya, thanks for putting this together, and we'll give it back to you.
Yeah, what a great webinar. We got through so many questions today, so really excited. For those of you, if we didn't get to your question, again, feel free to reach out to us directly, and we're happy to set up meetings. This is an alliance, so we want to meet with all of our alliance partners, key stakeholders, everybody here. But thank you all for attending. If you're interested in staying connected with Waterfront Alliance, you'll see in the chat that I was dropping links the whole time of ways that you can get connected, items you can read, places you can learn, volunteer opportunities. But in particular, I want to call out 3 events we have coming up. First is our next teacher training happening in March. That is for educators to learn the risk to resilience, engaging students in flood solutions. That's a virtual teacher training. So if you are an educator, please feel free to sign up for that free opportunity that has CEUs tied to it. Second is our Wedge live stream professionals course that's coming up in March. It's a 2-day, half-day course. This is going to be our first option in a while that has a hybrid option. So if you are in the New York City area, that second day of the course will be hosted at ARUP's offices here in New York City. So lots of networking opportunities if you're in the New York area, but if you're not, don't worry. You can still take the full course online through that live stream version. So please take a moment. We do have some free training opportunities. You can apply for eligibility on those on the Wedge website. And then the last is we want you all to save the date, hold on your calendars for the 2026 Waterfront Conference, Future Proofing Our Waterfronts. A save the date for that will go out next week with opportunities to purchase your early bird tickets. So if you're just chomping at the bit, that opportunity is going to be available very soon. But for all of these opportunities and events that I've posted in the chat and or have been mentioned, please feel free to check out the Waterfront Alliance website at waterfrontalliance.org. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.